In April 1945, as the spring sun rose over the rolling hills of southern England, a quiet unease settled across the Allied POW camps. The war in Europe was nearing its end, yet inside the camps, a different kind of tension lingered, one not born of artillery or battle, but of anticipation, expectation, and the subtle fear of the unknown. For many of the German women who had arrived at these camps, their minds were heavy with rumors, stories passed down through soldiers, and the stark contrast between what they had imagined and what lay ahead. From the moment they were captured, many carried with them an image of captivity that had been shaped by years of propaganda and wartime imagination. Letters from family described harsh conditions. Soldiers' tales painted camps as rigid, strict, and unyielding. There were whispers of punishment and surveillance, of scarcity and cold. Some of these women, barely out of their teens, had never been far from home, and now they were being marched into a world where silence, obedience, and invisibility were their first introductions. In those early days of arrival, the ground camps appeared deceptively calm. Rows of wooden barracks, neatly aligned, chimneys curling thin threads of smoke into the sky, and orderly fences that seemed both protective and confining. To outsiders, it could have been mistaken for a quiet village, but for the newcomers, every detail, each guard's glance, every clatter of metal, the smell of the earth mixed with fuel and damp wood, was a marker of uncertainty. The women were herded into small groups, often separated from any familiar companions, and led to the registration points. Here, every item they possessed was cataloged. Boots were examined, coats inspected, small personal items noted. Many of them carried letters or photographs tucked into their pockets, reminders of families they feared they might never see again. One 19-year-old, writing in her diary, described the process as a careful stripping of identity, though I still feel the eyes upon me, questioning who I am and what I know. It was during these first hours that the subtle psychological weight of captivity began to settle. Not all fear was loud. Some of it came in the form of hesitation, a pause before speaking, a moment of silence when others laughed, the slight stiffening of the body when a guard passed by. The expectation of punishment or harsh treatment was constant, though in many cases it would never come. The mind, however, thrives on anticipation, and for these women, the mind had plenty of room to imagine. Food was one of the first sources of internal conflict. Arriving at the mess halls, many of the German prisoners were met with tables laden with fresh bread, steaming soup, and metal cups of tea. Their training, experience, and the stories they had absorbed told them that they should brace for rationed or insufficient meals. And yet, the reality of abundance, though modest, provoked a mixture of disbelief, suspicion, and relief. Some hesitated, fingers hovering over the edge of the wooden tables. Others looked at one another, silently questioning whether they should dare to eat. One young woman noted in a letter to her mother, "It seems too much, and yet I am starving. I cannot bring myself to reach out. I feel I am being watched even when no one looks." Daily routines within the camps followed a slow, deliberate rhythm. Wake-up calls, inspections, and work assignments were punctuated with long stretches of waiting. For the German women, every idle moment became an opportunity for reflection, speculation, and fear. Would they be treated as criminals, as soldiers, or simply as strangers? Would they find themselves alone, or placed with companions who might provide solace? Some carried small diaries, others whispered questions to the friends they had not yet made. Every corner of the camp held a shadow of expectation, a quiet anxiety that no loud announcement could dispel. Letters provide one of the clearest windows into the internal world of these prisoners. A woman named Hildegard, writing to her sister in May 1945, described her mornings in the camp. "I wake to the sounds of boots on the gravel and the clink of dishes. I tell myself to breathe, to remember that nothing yet has happened, and still my stomach knots at the simplest gestures. Even when the bread is warm and fresh, I feel that taking it too quickly will summon some punishment that is only imagined." Her words reflect a common experience, an inner world shaped by fear and awe, by imagination meeting a reality that is often far gentler than expected. Camp staff recognized the importance of establishing a calm routine. Officers and attendants were instructed to maintain order without unnecessary intimidation. Guards were generally instructed to be neutral in demeanor. Yet the very presence of authority, the knowledge that movement and behavior were observed, created a psychological tension that was persistent. For the women, each gesture by a guard, a glance, a nod, or a pause, carried meaning. Their minds scanned for patterns, signals, and threats, often imagining them where none existed. Propaganda had a lasting impact on expectations. Many of the German prisoners had grown up under the influence of state media that painted Allied forces in stark terms. Tales of cruelty and harsh discipline were common. Letters between friends or family members often echoed this messaging. One diary entry reads, "We are told they are kind but ruthless, that they smile as they judge. How can one know what is true until it touches us ourselves?" This uncertainty, this gap between expectation and reality, formed the emotional landscape of the early days in camp. Work assignments were another point of tension. Women were often placed in kitchens, laundries, or simple maintenance roles. Some approached these tasks with trepidation, expecting reprimand or harsh correction. Others, unfamiliar with the structure of British camp labor, or anxious over every instruction. One woman noted, "Even washing the floors feels like a test. Every sweep, every scrub. I wonder if I have done it correctly, if I have failed before anyone speaks." The quiet diligence of their movements masked an inner storm of doubt, fear, and a longing for approval, even in a context where approval was neutral and largely procedural. The first interactions between prisoners themselves were marked by similar tension. Some sought comfort in shared experiences, whispering quietly in corners of the barracks. Others remained isolated, wary of drawing attention or appearing too bold. The psychological weight of expectation meant that silence often became a protective strategy. Even laughter, when it came, was hesitant, measured, as if testing the waters of a reality that was still uncertain. Many women found solace in small routines that they could control. Reading letters, mending clothing, or simply tracing patterns on the walls provided moments of calm. Some wrote journals filled with observations of the camp and the people around them. One passage from early April 1945 reads, "I watch the sun on the fields beyond the fence. It feels distant, as if I am watching a world I no longer belong to. Yet it moves as it always has, indifferent to our fears." These micro moments of reflection became essential tools for maintaining a sense of self in a world that demanded compliance and adaptation. The psychological landscape of the camp was further complicated by the presence of children or younger prisoners. Though rare, some women had been captured with dependents or were themselves still in their teens. The fear of responsibility, the worry for others, layered additional tension on top of their own expectations. Diaries reveal small, poignant details: a mother smoothing a daughter's hair, a sister holding another through the long nights, silent fears communicated through touch rather than words. Even in the absence of overt threat, the anticipation of danger shaped behavior. The mind often perceives threats in patterns and signals, whether real or imagined. Every step along a gravel path, every click of a lock, every murmured conversation between guards became part of a silent narrative in the prisoners' minds. In letters, some describe the sensation as a constant hum of anxiety, a tension that lingered even when sleep briefly arrived. Yet, alongside fear, there was awe. Awe at the order, at the care given to food, at the efficiency and cleanliness of the camp facilities. Many women noted this, quietly, almost reluctantly, as it conflicted with the stories they had absorbed. "I never imagined such care," one letter read. "It is strange, almost impossible that we are treated as humans first, prisoners second." This awe, subtle and uneasy, created a tension between what the mind expected and what the senses perceived. Religious or cultural observances offered another way to navigate the psychological terrain. Small acts, like lighting a candle, reciting prayers, or quietly marking birthdays allowed prisoners to maintain continuity with the life they had left behind. These rituals became anchors, stabilizing the mind against the tide of uncertainty. Diaries frequently mention these moments as islands of calm. I prayed as I have not prayed before. The walls do not answer, yet I feel a steadiness return. Letters, diaries, and camp records all indicate that the first days were marked by a mixture of trepidation and quiet discovery. Each woman carried a private narrative, blending fear, expectation, and careful observation. The human mind, when faced with a new environment, rapidly constructs stories to make sense of what is happening. In the camps, these stories were as varied as the women themselves. Some imagined harsh punishments, others imagined small kindnesses, yet nearly all were struck by the contrast between what they had been told and what they were experiencing. By the end of the first week, subtle patterns of adaptation began to emerge. Some women found comfort in quiet corners, others in shared work tasks. The act of eating, once hesitant, became more normalized. The rhythm of roll calls, meals, and chores provided a framework within which fear could be managed. Still, each day carried a residual tension, a question hovering in the background. What comes next? The anticipation of future interactions, of unknown events, and of personal limitations weighed heavily. Many diary entries reflect a mind constantly alert, finely tuned to detail. I listened for the smallest sound, one woman wrote. A chair scraping, a door closing, a guard's footsteps. Every sound carries meaning, and yet I cannot always interpret it. I'm learning to wait, to breathe, to endure. In this calm, observational space, fear was never loud. It was a quiet, persistent companion. As the first weeks passed, the women began to observe patterns among the staff. Certain guards were patient, others less so. Small acts of kindness, a nod, a gentle word, a shared task, were noted and remembered. The contrast between expectation and reality deepened the psychological experience. Many remarked that the camp, though restrictive, was less threatening than imagined. Yet the awe remained. Awe at the organization, at the discipline, at the humanity glimpsed in quiet moments of observation. By late April, the women had begun to internalize the rhythm of the camp. They moved through daily tasks with a careful awareness, balancing caution with adaptation. Letters describe moments of tentative laughter, quiet astonishment at the care taken in food preparation, and lingering hesitation to fully embrace the unexpected kindnesses encountered. It was a period of liminal tension, caught between fear and awe, between expectation and reality, between the imagined and the experienced. In many ways, the first part of their journey was not marked by dramatic events or crisis. Instead, it was the slow accumulation of micro moments, small surprises, and quiet observation that defined their experience. Each day reinforced the subtle psychological themes of captivity, anticipation, expectation, hesitation, and the quiet acknowledgement of human order and care in a place designed to contain them. As April drew to a close and the days lengthened, the women faced a collective realization. Their understanding of captivity, of the Allied forces, and of themselves was being reshaped. The fears born from propaganda, rumor, and imagination were tempered by lived experience. The awe they felt for the structure, organization, and unexpected consideration of camp staff created an internal tension that neither fully resolved nor diminished. It is in this space, between fear and awe, expectation and experience, that the story of the female prisoners in Britain begins. Their minds, finely tuned to subtle cues and small gestures, became the lens through which the camp was understood. And it is this lens, this quiet inner world, that would shape the days and weeks to come as the prisoners confronted a reality both familiar and entirely new. The tension of anticipation remained, unresolved, as the first chapter of their captivity came to a close. They had arrived, they had observed, they had begun to adapt. And yet, the true test of expectation versus reality was only beginning, waiting just beyond the horizon of these quiet spring days. The quiet spring days of late April 1945 gave way to the full realization of life inside the camp. The German women who had arrived with hearts heavy with expectation now faced the reality of captivity, a reality that was often far different from the stories they had carried with them. What awaited them was neither cruel nor harsh, yet it carried its own weight, subtle, unspoken, and persistent. In the early days, food had seemed almost suspicious in its abundance. Bread, soup, porridge, and occasional eggs appeared in portions that, while modest, were more generous than anything they had imagined. Initially, hands hesitated over bowls. Eyes scanned the mess hall as if anticipating a hidden trap. In diaries from May 1945, women described this sensation with recurring words: disbelief, hesitation, awe. One wrote, "I cannot eat, though I am hungry. I watch the others, and still I feel that taking too much would be wrong or dangerous. And yet, it is all here, laid before us." Many describe the first moments of tasting the food as a quiet revelation. Warmth, salt, and bread, the simple elements of survival, carried an emotional weight. For some, the act of eating became a gesture of courage, a small step into the unexpected reality of kindness within captivity. Letters revealed tiny micro moments: the first sip of tea that brought comfort, the smell of freshly baked bread, the surprise that no one scolded them for hesitation or for taking second helpings. Each encounter with food became a bridge between expectation and experience, slowly reshaping their understanding of the world around them. Daily life in the camp continued to emphasize structure and predictability. Morning roll calls, chores, and work assignments provided a rhythm that, paradoxically, offered both confinement and calm. Some women took on laundry work, others assisted in kitchens or camp maintenance. Each task, though simple, carried an internal test. Could they perform it correctly without reprimand? Would a small mistake invite punishment? Observation of these mundane tasks reveals the subtle psychological shift occurring, initial fear giving way to careful adaptation. One young woman, writing to her sister, described her mornings folding clothes. "I concentrate on the folds, the lines, the order. It is strange. Doing this work makes the world feel manageable, even when everything else feels uncertain. I am aware of every gesture, and in doing so, I feel a small sense of control returning." Control, however limited, became essential for mental stability. Each day, the women discovered the delicate balance between freedom and restriction, between expectation and reality. Interactions with guards, initially tense and wary, evolved as subtle patterns emerged. Some guards were quiet, almost invisible, allowing the prisoners to navigate their routines with minimal interference. Others offered simple words of guidance or acknowledgement, a nod, a soft instruction. Even these small gestures carried meaning, registering as signals of safety or caution. Diaries note how the women scanned these interactions with careful attention. One entry reads, "The guard watched me as I swept the floor. I felt a chill, expecting reprimand, and yet nothing came. Only a look, neutral, observing. I exhale and feel a strange calm." Awe and disbelief continued to accompany everyday tasks. The women had expected harsh discipline, shouting, or constant surveillance. Instead, they encountered a measured, procedural approach. Letters reveal repeated phrases: "I cannot believe it. It feels almost impossible. I am afraid to trust it, yet it is true." This tension between the imagination and the senses formed the emotional core of the camp experience. Fear lingered, not as overt terror, but as a subtle, persistent awareness. Even small liberties carried weight. Prisoners were sometimes allowed to walk beyond the immediate camp boundaries, under supervision. The sight of green fields, distant hills, or a simple fence line became sources of reflection. One diary from May 1945 reads, "I walk near the edge of the camp. The sun is warm, the grass soft underfoot. I feel both free and watched. Freedom is strange here. It is measured in steps and distance, yet it reminds me of what I left behind. This tension between liberation and captivity, expectation and reality, continued to define their psychological landscape. Letters from family outside the camp added another layer to their experience. Many women carried anxieties for loved ones, reflecting on homes damaged by war, families displaced, and uncertainty about the future. At the same time, correspondence offered comfort, a reminder of continuity and human connection beyond the barbed wire. One woman wrote, "I receive your letters and read them over and over. They remind me that I am still part of a world that exists beyond these walls, that life continues even while I wait." These letters became lifelines, anchoring prisoners to identity, memory, and hope. The psychological weight of expectation continued to shape reactions to authority, but also to each other. Women watched companions carefully, interpreting gestures, inferring moods, and silently gauging risk. Moments of empathy or kindness between prisoners were often understated but deeply felt. A shared blanket on a cold night, an encouraging word before chores, a glance that acknowledged fear without judgment. These small gestures, quietly performed, became crucial in managing the internal tension of fear and awe. Religious or cultural rituals gained significance in this context. Even in captivity, some prisoners found comfort in familiar practices, marking religious holidays, quietly observing personal rituals, or reflecting on the cycle of days. One diary entry describes, "I lit a small candle at the window. Its flame is tiny, yet it reminds me of a world outside. I feel steadier, though the walls around me remain the same. The light is mine, though no one else may see it." These rituals offered private affirmation, psychological resilience, and the subtle reclaiming of agency within a controlled environment. A particularly revealing aspect of the early months was the recognition of human order and care within the camp. Prisoners observed the preparation of meals, the cleaning of barracks, and the structured routines with a mixture of awe and incredulity. One young woman wrote, "I never imagined such care could exist in a place for prisoners. The kitchens are clean, the floors polished, the beds arranged neatly. I expected harshness. Instead, I see effort, attention, and the quiet respect for us as people." The awe was complicated for it challenged ingrained beliefs while offering reassurance that the world could be structured, kind, and watchful without being cruel. As the weeks passed, subtle psychological shifts became more apparent. Fear, though persistent, was tempered by observation and experience. Anticipation gave way to understanding. One diary from June 1945 notes, "I no longer flinch at the sounds of footsteps. I recognize patterns, routines, and intention. I know what is expected of me, and in meeting it, I discover calm I did not think possible." The camp, initially a place of imagined horrors and constant vigilance, began to feel like a space where human order existed alongside confinement. Despite these small comforts, the women were aware that their captivity was real. Letters and diaries often reflect a tension between acknowledgement of care and the persistent sense of restriction. I am fed, I have tasks, I am watched, and still I am not free. The walls remain, the fences remain. This is not a home, and yet I feel alive in a way I did not expect. The duality of fear and awe, expectation and reality became a defining emotional pattern, one that shaped every interaction and observation. Work in the camp took on multiple layers of significance. Beyond practical necessity, it offered psychological engagement. Tasks, whether cleaning, cooking, or mending, were performed with care and attention, providing focus and structure. One diary notes, "I fold the laundry slowly, deliberately, each crease perfect. My mind follows the folds, the rhythm, the order. I am not thinking of punishment, only of the task. In this small way, I am free." The simple act of doing became a means of regaining agency, a quiet rebellion against the lingering anxiety of expectation. The arrival of new prisoners reinforced the psychological contrast within the camp. Women who had been there for weeks observed newcomers with a mixture of empathy and insight. They noticed hesitation, fear, and awe mirrored in fresh faces. This reflection deepened self-awareness, how far they had come from the paralyzing anticipation of arrival, and how the subtleties of fear and awe had become familiar companions in their daily lives. Some prisoners began to develop internal strategies to cope with uncertainty. Observation, repetition, and ritual became tools to manage expectations and moderate anxiety. One young woman wrote, "I repeat the same movements each morning. Bed made, floor swept, hair combed. Each act calms me. The world remains outside my control, yet these actions are mine. They anchor me." The psychological landscape of captivity was now defined by a careful balance between vigilance and routine, fear and adaptation, awe and understanding. Letters and diaries from mid-1945 reveal a nuanced awareness of the difference between expectation and reality. "I thought this place would be harsh," one woman wrote. "I imagined cruelty behind every glance, punishment in every gesture. And yet what I find is care, order, and quiet humanity. I do not fully trust it, but I see it, and it changes how I feel inside." The slow transformation of perception became central to the prisoner's experience, illustrating the profound impact of lived reality on imagination and anticipation. Even small acts of kindness, extra portions of food, a shared joke, or a glance of understanding carried enormous psychological weight. Diaries repeatedly mention these details, emphasizing the subtle, cumulative effect of human behavior. One prisoner noted, "A guard smiled today. I do not know why. I feel relief and surprise at the same time. Perhaps this is not what I expected, but it feels important." In captivity, such small gestures became markers of reassurance and pathways to trust, however tentative. As summer approached in 1945, the women had settled into a rhythm of psychological adaptation. Fear, while never entirely absent, had lost its paralyzing intensity. Awe, once tinged with suspicion, had become more balanced, a recognition of human care alongside the realities of confinement. Diaries reflect a quiet reflection. "I have learned to navigate each day. I do not know what the next will bring, yet I can meet it with calm, with observation, with small acts of care for myself and others." The women recognized the difference between imagined cruelty and observed care. They discovered that fear could coexist with trust, and that awe could emerge even in circumstances of restriction. Their psychological resilience grew from small, repeated experiences of stability, observation, and subtle human connection. The experience of female prisoners in Britain during these months highlights a profound aspect of human perception: the mind's capacity to anticipate danger, to imagine hardship, and to respond with fear even when reality is neutral or benevolent. The gap between expectation and experience, fear and awe, anticipation and reality became the defining emotional texture of captivity. Letters written at the end of their first months in camp convey a quiet, reflective understanding. "I have discovered that fear can exist without immediate threat," one reads. "I have learned that awe is possible in small gestures, in routines, in care. I am both prisoner and observer, both fearful and amazed, and in this I find a strange calm." These reflections captured the subtle internal journey of the women, a journey shaped not by violence or dramatic upheaval, but by observation, reflection, and adaptation. By mid-1945, the female prisoners had developed a keen awareness of the psychological landscape of captivity. Every action, glance, and gesture carried layers of meaning. Yet through careful observation, adherence to routines, and small acts of personal agency, they navigated the delicate balance between fear and awe, expectation and reality. The camp, once imagined as a place of harshness and threat, revealed itself as a structured environment where human care coexisted with restriction. In the quiet evenings, as the sun dipped behind distant hills, the women would write letters, reflect in diaries, and share subtle gestures of companionship. Fear and awe continued to coexist, woven together into a complex tapestry of internal experience. These months, defined by the slow reconciliation of expectation with reality, highlight the profound capacity of the human mind to endure, adapt, and find meaning in the smallest details. The story of these female prisoners reminds us that captivity is as much a psychological experience as it is a physical one. Fear may arrive first, shaped by imagination and rumor. Awe may follow, arising from observation, care, and the unexpected humanity of others. And in the space between, internal worlds are reshaped, quietly, persistently, and with lasting impact. The journey of expectation and observation, of fear and awe, of anticipation and adaptation, culminates not in dramatic spectacle, but in the subtle understanding of human resilience. For these women, the camps in Britain were both a confinement and the classroom, where every moment, every gesture, and every micro-interaction contributed to the slow, careful reconciliation of mind and reality. In the end, the subtle fear and awe of female prisoners in Britain was not defined by the bars of their cells, the fences that surrounded them, or the uniforms they wore. It was defined by the inner world of observation, reflection, and adaptation, an emotional landscape that transformed slowly, quietly, and indelibly under the gentle, measured rhythms of daily life. And in that quiet transformation, the women discovered an unexpected truth: that captivity could reveal not only limitations, but also the depth of human endurance, perception, and subtle courage.